I'm going to talk about moral and religious education. There's a big debate in my country, the United Kingdom, about faith schools, religious schools. Are they a good thing, or maybe they're a problem? It seemed to me that the conversation that we were having, the public debate, was often quite confused. And there were some arguments that were very popular, but they were very bad arguments, but people didn't realise that they were bad arguments. So I decided I'd write a book about it and just explain what I thought. And I'm just going to take maybe two ideas from the book and explain them just so you can see what you think about them. And I'm hoping that they will be relevant to Romania, but of course I am coming from the UK, and the UK is what I know about, and I wouldn't want to prejudge the situation in Romania. So I think we're about ready now. The book is called The War for Children's Minds. Here's some background. The question I'm going to look at is how liberal or how authoritarian should we be in our approach to moral and religious education? So, liberal or authoritarian? How much in each direction should we be, is the question. In my country, in the United Kingdom, before the 1960s, children were typically expected to accept more or less uncritically what they were told about morality and religion. They were passive receivers of information. They were not encouraged to think critically about moral and religious issues very much at all. Many in fact, religious educators showed a big brother-like enthusiasm for policing not just what children did, but also what was going on in their heads, the kind of thoughts they were having, the kind of doubts or questions. They were very interested in controlling that as well. I'll give you an example. Excuse my images. A friend of mine who was educated in the 1960s, she went to a Catholic school, and she's not Catholic anymore, but she tells me that even today, if she dares to think a thought that's not Catholic, she feels guilty. She feels uncomfortable. So the Catholic Church were very effective in getting inside people's heads and controlling the directions in which thoughts were flowing. And they used many different techniques with which I'm sure we are all familiar in order to do that. Now, during the 1960s, many Western societies became much more liberal. Not here, obviously, but in my country. We were encouraged to throw off the old traditions and authorities. We were encouraged to think for ourselves and make our own judgments. And this shift, if you like, from trusting the external authority to moral autonomy and making your own judgments and thinking for yourself, this was obviously reflected in the kind of education that was offered. So in some places, it just stopped. There was no moral education. Whereas others developed alternative ways of educating children. That you can educate children morally without just being authoritarian about it. And one way that we have been exploring recently in Britain, in America, in Australia, is philosophy in the classroom. We get children together, pretty young children sometimes, into groups, sitting around, and they can think up big questions, and then they can discuss them together. And that's sometimes called P4C, or Philosophy for Children. There are many different kinds of programs. I don't always think that they're that successful, but it's an interesting alternative, a different way of getting children to think about morality. And there's a payoff. When you encourage children to do that, they become measurably more intelligent. You know, they've done studies. It turns out they're 6.5% more intelligent 1 year later, and that's retained. But also the schools that have these kind of programs have much less bullying, they are far more cohesive, the children care more about each other, and so on. So you build a good atmosphere and a good sense of morality, but not in an authoritarian way. It doesn't have to be authority that morality is ultimately rooted in. There are alternatives, and they work. So as I say, some educators abandon religious education, others develop these alternative strategies. However, now people are saying, we've gone too far. It's too liberal. Look around you. Crime, vandalism, teenage pregnancies, immorality, corporate corruption from top to bottom. Society is unraveling. There's too much freedom. And that's the root cause of our social problems. And often in the West people say there's a moral malaise. I don't know if you have that expression here. The moral malaise, they say. It's a kind of sickness which is infecting Western societies, and it's all going to end with the destruction of Western civilization. They're very pessimistic, some of these people. So that's the kind of debate that's going on. There are people who are saying, oh no, we've got too liberal, and then there are other people saying, no, let's still be liberal, it's important to be liberal. So that's the kind of debate that's going on. Now, so what many religious conservatives want is to bring authority back into the classroom. It was the loss of authority that produced the moral sickness, and they want to bring moral authority back into the classroom, and a very obvious way of doing that would be to reintroduce religious authority. And so we have a great deal of support for faith schools for this reason. We have, for example, 150 new Islamic schools in the UK, state-funded. It's coming back in a big way, faith schools, religious education. And the justification very often is, without religious authority, society will eventually disintegrate and fall apart. No moral structure anymore, no moral foundations. Is this the kind of debate that you're having here? It may not be, but
yes.
It sounds familiar. It does sound familiar, okay. So in my book, I argue we should be very liberal indeed in our approach. I'm very, very liberal in our approach to moral and religious education. So here I'm just going to do two things. First, I'm going to clarify the kind of liberal approach that I recommend. And I'm going to, well, I say I'm going to demolish one popular anti-liberal argument. We'll see how that goes. I may do something else.